We're live.
Excellent. Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure for me to be on today with Alex for Dystopia Unmasked, and it's a pleasure for me to welcome you all to this episode of Dystopia Unmasked titled Breaking Oligarchy's Grip today. And off air, we were discussing with Alex um, the implications of the title. But what I would like to do is I'd like to invite our audience today, and I'll repeat this if I'm firm enough to remember. I'd like to repeat this to our audience as it grows, hopefully, during the session, to revisit the November 17th, 2024 article, Breaking Oligarchy's Grip. November 17th, 2024 is when Alex uploaded Breaking Oligarchy's Grip, which is going to be at the core of our conversations today. And we will be, I think it's fair to tell our audience that we will be revisiting some of the articles in the archives for conversation and for discussion, unearthing them as we see relevance and pertinence of the points discussed therein. For instance, in breaking the grip of oligarchy, breaking oligarchy's grip, a number of points are discussed, and one of them echoes well with the most recent post on Alex Carberry's page on Substack, Why Illness Rarely Starts When Discomfort Begins. This is published February 19th, 2026, in your notes from the clinic. And I saw how it gels so well from a sociological point of view with the things that are going on in the world. And I'd like to ask you, first of all, why did you write that illness rarely starts when discomfort begins?
I wrote that because as an experience in my clinic is that people come and they are ill and they only identify their illness with the beginning of their pain. So people associate the pain with the illness. So if pain arrives very late in the development of the processes of an illness, then people arrive to me very late, right? Because that's when they had the pain. And so what I'm really trying to do, and I think it's relevant it's so much more relevant to what we're talking about now, which is power and politics, that we recognize that the problems that we have come long before the crisis. Okay. The crisis is the eruption of a set of structural tensions that have been out of balance for a long time. Okay. And it's the same in the body. So I think my approach is very much influenced by my clinical experience. So my approach of in sociology, politics, and anthropology, etc., which I all apply to medicine, to politics, and psychoanalysis to politics, they all come from my clinical experience. Sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine, and that is going exactly in the direction of what I wanted to find out about. When you say that illness rarely begins when discomfort starts, you say there should be early warning. There should be an early warning sensitivity in patients. Is that what you're saying? Sort of a sense of a, perhaps a more encompassing definition of health, a more profound awareness of what health is.
I think just like it's very similar to the political. It's that we have to begin to think about living to reflect upon our health. because our health is part of the quality of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if we cannot think in kind of medicinally or healthily, or yeah, if we can't think about these things in ways that, so because there's thinking politically and there's thinking medicinally, then what happens is that we we read politics by reading crises.
We read politics by reading crises. As we read, how does the analogy work here? As we read health by reading disease? No.
Yes, precisely. So we read health as being the absence of disease,
Yes.
right? That's not health.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, health is to begin to understand. It's like people will come to me and they say, okay, how much water should I drink? So I say to them, look, there are going to be some things that you're going to notice. If you're waking up in the morning with headaches, then you're not drinking enough. Okay, if your bowels aren't moving once or twice a day easily, then you're not drinking enough. Huh? Huh? If your urine is color is these colors, then you're not drinking enough. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not urinating at least this amount of times in the day, you're not drinking enough. If you're urinating over this, then you're likely not drinking too much. Right. So if you see, these give people nodes of 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 limits within which they can explore their experience within their bodies, because this is the difficulty of talking about health as if it is out there, far away from you, um, which somebody tells you what you are. So part of my clinical method, I now have to basically treat people to begin to trust their own bodies,
Mm-hmm.
because we are taught to deeply distrust our own bodies, and we'll find that mirrored in the politics, in that
Mm.
we're in our political, we have outsourced the political acumen to a peculiar class. And if a society does that, there's a point at which it happen the that class can act without the rest of the polity understanding the implications of what is going on.
Hold
So
on.
it's yeah.
You're going too fast. You're going too fast. I have some intermediary questions before we get there.
Okay.
And this is
Okay.
strictly egotistical because it's one of my favorite concepts, one of my favorite words that I
Mm-hmm.
feel you didn't mention in your notes from the clinic on your page this week, where you say illness rarely starts when discomfort begins. And I
Mm-hmm.
had the feeling you were, in fact, talking about homeostasis. And just as you were now, I felt you're talking about homeostasis. I came across this term, homeostasis, some years ago, and I was shocked that I had never heard about it before in all my life. And, mm,
Yeah. No, no, no,
and
no, no.
because of what it means. I mean, I'd probably have to look up a technical definition of it, but from memory, the definition of homeostasis is a sort of balance um, of a system in which all elements of the system, none of the elements of the system are overriding their function, and none of them are underperforming. So there's no overperformance, no underperformance. There's a systemic interdependent balance, a metabolic balance, and that is sort of how I utilize the term homeostasis, and it is used often as a synonym for health. Sort of, if a system is in homeostasis, it is healthy and it is functioning. But
Okay.
then, if I can throw in a wrench into this idealist kind of reading of it, sometime later, I then picked up that when you go to the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they observe a certain number of symptoms, they may conclude that they have to take a closer look at your liver. And in so doing, then this person that was giving that lecture said, generally, as a rule of thumb, if your liver is still operational to about 20% of its capabilities, you are considered still healthy. Your liver is considered healthy as long as it's still operational to a capacity of about 20%. This has haunted me ever since I heard this. I said,
Okay.
what are you talking about? 20% of a, if my liver is still healthy at 20%, it's considered healthy by medical health staff.
Okay.
So where does homeostasis come in here? Where does health end? Where does disease begin?
Okay. So the term homeostasis is it's an American physiologist who coined that term in 1926. Okay, so the frameworks I'm talking in are more ancient than that. And he has some points and he has some places where I disagree with it. He wrote a book called The Wisdom of the Body. I think his name is Canon. Canon. Is it? Let me see.
I've
You
heard
see,
about that.
his name is Walter. Yeah, his name is Walter Bradford Cannon. Right. If you've ever been to Bradford, it's not a name that you can forget. Okay.
I've been told to read The Wisdom of the Body many times.
Yeah. And then so I would, whilst I find it useful, okay, I because our modes of medicine are all based upon balance, right? The kind of medicine that I practice, they're all based upon balance, balance of forces, balance of humors, balance of activities, right? And that balance we recognize is quite dynamic. So there isn't like one balance for this kind. The attempts of saying, okay, there's a balance for this kind of crisis, okay, which in Greek medicine means temper. Right? That you really have to, in looking at balance, you have to look at the person, their emotional life, where they are in their life cycle, okay, how old they are, um, the kind of society they live in, the weather of the place that they live in, okay, um, the terrain and they live in. If they live on mountains, it's different. So if they live in valleys, the energy that they need to and because if they live in valleys, okay, it gets damper. So often we have to in our prescriptions, we place more of the mint family, which has oils which open the periphery, which they encourage peripheral circulation because it's damp. Okay, so it gets damp and penetrating. So you need to make sure that that the skin operates effectively as a barrier. Okay, so in this sense, um, the ideas of people like Bradford, like Cannon, they're useful, right? But they confirm parts of this kind of more ancient approach. Okay, and just to clarify, um, my the medicine I began to learn as a child is from the Amazon. Okay, it's a fusion of African, Amerindian, and European herbal medicine with some Chinese elements, right? Because reflecting the place. So we've got the indigenous, but we also have herbs from Ayurveda. So it became this really very peculiar kind of medicine which exists just on that side of the Guyana Shield. It's different when you cross over into Brazil because you cross the Guyana Shield. different, okay?
Mhm.
Because in those two places, they had, um, because of the sociology in those places, right? They brought
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
indentured immigrants, they had slaves, they had this, they had that. So all of these different forces come together, or inputs come together, and they develop a very different Amazonian medicine, which affects all of us. So you have medicine which would be more indigenous, but it's not devoid of these elements, okay?
Would you accept the qualifier of heterodox or syncretic?
Um, I would say that our context is Creole,
That makes sense. That makes
and
sense.
as a result of it being Creole, it our medicine reflects who we are. Okay,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
um, our diet is Creole.
Fascinating.
Okay.
Fascinating. I just have to say, you see, this is where Creole. You have an. I will have to find it and indicate it to our audience. You do have uh, a reflection on what Creole actually means
Hmm.
in the context of thinking about the world in the 21st century.
Yeah.
And that is something I think our audience should be made aware of.
Yeah,
I'll
and and
find
and
it as we
and,
speak, and I'll indicate it.
okay, and because in those articles, I think Estan Fritos is one of them.
Estan fritos. Let me find it. Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and something the icon art. But the writer who actually helped me to come to terms with that Creoleness of my region is a writer called Edgar Mittelholzer.
You've
And if you
mentioned him
can
before.
read him, I would say you really benefit from Edgar Mittelholzer. He
You've
is,
mentioned him before. Yes.
yeah. Okay. So I'm saying that that homeostasis is useful, but I don't it doesn't, it lacks. Do you see how that broader contextual approach to medicine really matters?
Yes, I understand it. It's context sensitivity, and it actually reminds me of physics in a sense that the temperature uh, of when water boils depends on the pressure, the atmospheric pressure around it.
Yes, and a lot of you have to remember that a lot of natural science is developed out of medicine.
Mm.
Okay,
Hmm.
amongst the ancients, it was very rare to have a scientist or even an engineer who did not know medicine. Okay, when
Hmm.
you go back to the kind of origin aspects within a civilization. Okay,
Hmm.
because because medicine uniquely teaches you um, diagnostic and analytic discipline,
Yes.
right? And it punishes the lack of that. So, like when people come to me and they say, like remedies. Oh, do you have remedies? I'm going,
Mm.
don't come to me, right? Because I need context. And sometimes, sometimes somebody comes to me. I say, look, man, learn to drink more water and then come back, right? And then when they start to drink more water, 80% of their symptoms have disappeared, and I've only got to treat 20%.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So so when you, uh, these are very different kinds of approaches. That's not a remedial approach,
Yes.
right? This is an approach which is about reestablishing balance. And in order to reestablish balance, you have to understand that the main medicine is the person, right? So you carry your medicine. You carry your medicine. Okay. Um, and many traditions have that, right? So that in a way, what I am doing is connecting to the medicine that is within you. And I certainly guided by the medicine that is within you because I'm looking at what your body wants to do and why it wants to do it. Okay. So I want to shift that back to politics, because what I'm basically saying is that There are two things I'm saying here. One is that the political is something that you are already embroiled in. There's nobody who is exempt from the political. And so you must have the tools to understand your political embeddedness. You must have the tools to understand how what you eat affects you politically,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you cannot trace your life in that way, you can never really understand the political. You cannot. Okay. Um.
Now, yeah,
Mhm.
I'll let you finish before I jump in with
Okay. So
something
so
that
so
may.
that's one end of it, and that as a result of that, an ideological approach to the political is i- is almost so. And I'm not saying that ideologies don't matter, but I'm saying that if you pin yourself to primarily an ideological approach to the political, it is like you are denying the political embeddedness, which results in the whole plethora of political approaches that people take from in the history of man, because man is naturally a political animal, naturally a politically experimental creature. And so you have to understand, it's a sense, my approach is metapolitical. I don't take an ideological approach. I'm going, okay, so what is the position? But what does this context need to respond to the tensions, forces, pressures that it is facing, conditions it is facing, in order to remain politically able to respond. Okay. And in this case, I might use homeostasis.
I would have to accept, I believe, that there is such a thing in politics as unideological.
Hmm.
Is there in politics and political matters any such thing as an unideological stance in politics or in human affairs for that matter? Is there ever an ideology? The reason I say this is because somehow, normatively, the discipline of political science, and I believe this goes through most of humanities in the West, is taught under the premise and with the obligation of the students and the practitioners of a necessity to be objective and to be ideology free, which is in itself an ideological statement and premise.
Okay. All right. So that is done in the background of a normativeness. So that is on the ideological assumption that democracies are the ultimate pinnacle of of the political evolution of the species. Okay. So when that position is taken
But your
to
friend is
to
to blame
norm.
for that. Your friend Aristotle is to blame for that.
No, he isn't. Aristotle was a lot more nuanced than that.
I say that to provoke a little bit. It is true that I think, was it Churchill who said democracy is the worst form of political governance, but show me a better one.
Okay, and I would say that democracy is a form of political governance, and and if you don't understand the others, then you can never really understand the different shades and tensions that democracy has to negotiate if it is to work as democracy, right? Because there are so many shades of democracies. There's a shade of democracy when everybody must have a say. That's only possible within small communities. Okay, and then what tends to have to happen is that even if there's small communities, then you agree and you delegate somebody to lead in something, and in that thing they become a dictator, right? They tell you what to do, right? If you don't, so that you what by embracing the political life of man, you are then able to approach things without having to take positions based upon political foreclosure. So there are certain types of things we cannot discuss, right? And when they occur, or on other things, if they occur, we disavow what is actually happening. It is happening, but it's not. Yeah. And so we end up with these, like at present in the White House, um, Trump is ruling by executive orders. Okay, and so this is what happens when democracies are so steeped in disavowal and foreclosures that the only way forward is that they have to take the exception. So basically, the you are using a tool which the Romans would have identified as a tool for the dictator. Okay, because the Romans in the Roman Republic, they had the dictator, and the dictator doesn't mean what it means today. Okay, and its color for the meaning that it has today comes from the actions of somebody called Sulla. Okay, I'm not going to dig into these in any detail, but I'm telling you because part of why I'm doing what I'm doing is I'm saying we have to be politically aware. Okay, we have to be politically aware because the political is um, the most dangerous aspect of life that we will ever face. Right? It is literally like medicine. Right? I say that the political and medicine are the two sciences which you must grasp.
This is I'll let it marinate a little bit. As I let this marinate a little bit, to transition from the first part of our conversation, in which I looked in some detail at why illness rarely starts when discomfort begins. I intended to transition into today's priority theme, which is breaking the grip of oligarchy. Your paper that was published November 17th, 2024. I mentioned this for our
Mm-hmm,
audience to look it up in the archives and read it.
mm-hmm,
The subtitle is Workers' Power and the Future of Politics. And in substance, remember, this is from November 2024,
mm-hmm,
and we are in 2026 now, in February.
mm-hmm,
And time flew so chaotically past us from a political point of view, as if things have been accelerated deliberately by
mm-hmm,
by uh, as if we were caught in the maelstrom of an accelerating hegemon, accelerating its speed of action and its scope of action. The theaters of operation in which the hegemon, the global, the planetary hegemon, is acting together with its libidinal subcontractor. The way the theaters of operation have multiplied, the intensity with which actions have been applied to populations, and I'm thinking specifically of the Palestinians who have
And the Sudanese.
experienced, pardon me?
And the Sudanese.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, because this is not to deny the qualitative aspect in analysis, but in sheer terms of quantity, what is happening in Ukraine and what is happening at the front line between Russia and Ukraine and what is happening in Sudan, by far, quantitatively, in terms of loss of life, in terms of the recipients of misery, pain, and suffering, quantitatively, by far exceeds what is unfolding in the theater of operations, where the destruction Israel visits upon Palestine is uh, observed. But this is a quantitative matter.
Yeah.
And in a sense, the directness of the involvement of the greatest power to have military power to have ever been assembled on this planet, the directness of the involvement of the US in that theater, both Ukraine and Palestine, I think is responsible for why, among other things, there are many other aspects, but why, for example, Congo and Sudan don't get as much uh, um, on global civil society concern and conversation. I didn't say media, civil society engagement as what is happening
Okay.
in Ukraine, what is happening in
Okay.
Israel, Palestine.
Well, I'd like to address this one because
Yes, please.
this one is an itch I have.
Mm,
That when people say, "Oh, Sudan and Congo don't get the attention that Palestine gets," right? Or that Ukraine gets. Well, Palestine gets a lot more attention than Ukraine.
hmm
Okay. Um, and basically, when we're saying this, we're often saying this on social media platforms.
hmm
And what you have to recognize is that what we know is usually subjected to a platform.
Yes.
Okay. That's how our geometry of relations is controlled. And so those platforms are not controlled by us, right?
hmm
They're just not controlled by us. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And as a result of that, what happens is that the biases of the platform exist. You cannot stop that. Okay. What has to happen is you have to build your own platforms. So everybody, when people are moaning about this, about why this doesn't happen, and I'm looking at them and I'm going, so you're basically asking that oppressive platform to fulfill your needs.
hmm
It's going to fulfill your needs in a way that benefits it. And this is the point of the article, is that is that we have to begin to fulfill many of those needs. If we do not choose and fulfill those needs, then they will be provided for us in the to the benefit of the oligarchies.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. The But I mean, this is an important point to be made, that if you want certain subjects to be discussed more, you have to make an effort to bring it up more.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
No?
No, I'm saying something more radical than that.
Mm-hmm.
That what the control. Okay, everybody's going. I've basically removed myself from Instagram. Okay, because the problem is the platform itself. Okay, so
Yes.
and then people are telling me that, oh, Instagram should behave better. Why should Instagram behave better? It's their platform. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
if you want radical political change, you have to build the platforms yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be able to to produce the geometry of the relations that can sustain the platform. And you have to know that. If you cannot do that, right, then you're going to be reduced to perpetually begging the platform to fulfill your needs, and it will not, because the platform has been designed to fulfill its own needs or the needs of its owners.
Then we better not look at the owners of Substack.
I have.
But for some reason, the leash is much is less tight than on Instagram.
Yes, because they have different, but they have a different ownership structure. Let's call it that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the point is that what we have to recognize is that in the 20th century, you have to open source the cloud platforms.
And this is an obligation the owners of these platforms also have to abide by, whether they like it or not.
No, they don't. They will define what open source is in their,
Mm.
to their benefit, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
to understand this is the core of the political.
Mm-hmm.
The core of the political is that the, it is about power, and power leverages the resources to benefit itself. And in
Isn't
go on.
no. I'll come in after the sentence finishes.
Okay,
Sorry.
and so power leverages the resources to benefit itself. And so what you must have for a healthy politics, you must have multiple competing sources of power, right? So that power power has to check itself, right? So and you can't. So what has happened is that we have our economies have become, or our politics or polities have become ruled by such an entrenched group of oligarchy that they have just continued to accrete. They just continue to collect all of the power and the leverage, right? Because they don't have competition. As a result, they've just gathered it all, and everybody's going, ah, and then you're asking them to behave themselves. Behave yourself. You cannot do that. You must. The point is that that power must have to behave itself. Not that you have to ask it; it must have to behave itself. And then when you're talking and negotiating, that's a very different um that's a very different terrain.
Mm. Fascinating. Now, I wanted to jump in, claiming that the isn't the idea itself that power is the key variable, which I happen to agree with. That power is the key variable of politics and of political analysis. Isn't that it, too an ideological stance, an ideological position?
Okay, so what's the difference between ideology and philosophy?
That ideology does not have the openness to scrutiny that philosophy invites per se.
Okay.
Ideology would be at the other end of the spectrum of openness to scrutiny. or
Okay.
openness to questioning is an intuitive answer that I would
Okay.
give at this.
Okay. So, and this is really important.
Mm.
Philosophy is the study of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start to study the political questions, we have to, if we have a pre-prepared answer, so if it has a telos, then we have to examine the telos, right? And I use this word a lot. So telos is that the system is designed to arrive at a place, right? The system already has a destination. Ideology always has a destination, and 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 so often what happens is that you're not, if you are are examining the destination um, critically, you are seen as almost a heretic. Okay, so often I will get, oh, you do not understand Marx. You don't understand Marx. It's almost like that means that I'm now asking questions that they find uncomfortable about Marx's position,
Mm.
right? Which Marx himself does in his books, right? Yeah. Um,
Hold on, but I have to say that.
hold on. I'm getting interrupted. And
Okay,
please,
okay.
yeah. Let me just stop. So continue. I'm listening.
No, I just wanted to say, to get from a Marxist, you do not understand Marx, is
And-
a higher
Mhm,
level compliment from
mhm,
a Marxist than most people
mhm.
are aware of. Because the lowest insult you'll get from a Marxist is, you haven't read Marx.
Oh, okay.
You haven't read Marx, which is you know nothing. You don't understand anything because you haven't read it. You don't understand the world you live in. And I think one of the other insults that Marxists will level at you is that you have a scattered set of theories. You have a theory about everything and anything, but the reason you have a theory about
Mhm,
everything and anything is because you haven't read Marx. Because then you would have the theory for everything.
mhm.
But because you haven't read him, you have a theory for every specific thing. And
Yeah.
that
But okay.
that is that's just a footnote from my
Yeah.
experience of having conversations with advanced
Yeah.
Marxists, let's put it this way.
So I'm saying, okay. So I'm saying that ideology
Mm.
has pre-prepared answers
Hmm.
for what would be philosophical question. Okay.
I'll accept that for the purposes of this conversation, because otherwise it'll lead us too far. Because I agree with
Well,
you.
no, I think it's a very important
Distinction.
distinction. I think we should get that it already has prepared answers for the questions. Yeah.
Which may be due to its diligence. I've been so diligent, I found answers for many questions that may be put to me.
Whatever they now you're introducing tellers. I'm talking about qualities. They have pre-prepared answers for the question. Okay. Now, when you so term ideology, people who are ideologues get very uncomfortable. Okay.
Mm.
But in terms of the study of philosophy, the philosophical position, that's what you notice about the uh, about ideologies.
Hmm.
Okay, so
Mm.
so they're either asking questions about equitable wealth redistribution.
Mm.
Okay, or they're asking questions of, or they're saying that regardless of the circumstances, that you must have minimal government intervention. Okay, so that's usually a libertarian approach.
Hmm.
And so
That,
so
that's,
so
you know, that- Yep, I'm listening. I'm listening.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done. I think I'm done.
No, but I get it, and it's important. And I mean, to the core of this conversation, why is it? Why does it matter that we are speaking of this particular issue um,
Hmm.
in the wider frame of this conversation? Because we are having a critical look at the notions of good governance, largely put. And we are in 2026 now, um, 3 years, 2.5 years after. You know, the title that we had a couple of weeks ago was The World That Worked.
Hmm.
And most people who follow politics and who pay attention to politics will have had this feeling that there has been a rupture of some sort. There has been a transition of some sort
Hmm.
from a world in which predictable macro political governance behavior
Yes.
has become frightening, frightening. For criticizing certain activities of governance has become a mode to endanger oneself, especially in the UK, where 900 plus elderly protesters were, I understand it's currently in revision legally, but were arrested for protesting against genocide.
Okay. So what you're saying is that I've been warning about this a long time ago,
Hmm.
right? Because what you saw was that governments began to use lawfare. And I highlighted that very early in the articles in on dystopian months about the use of lawfare. So they in order to sneak what is an executive order through the back door, they they make they take an action based upon a legal claim that they know that they cannot be defended. Okay, and it buys them 3 to 5 years of the capacity to operate under those assumptions, but they know it's going to be reversed. It's not defensible, right? And it's usually done by legal minds. Okay. So that was a warning. For me, that was a warning because it tells you that power had become very, very cynical about power and the law, right? It was utilizing power to achieve goals. And it didn't matter if they were illegal, they would make it contingently legal. When it becomes illegal, it doesn't matter because the job's done anyway, right?
Hmm.
The statistics exist, the job's done. And then because the statistics exist, because they were doing that, then later on you see some of these matters um, reasserting themselves through through policy.
How does this observation, which is I think something that many people feel is ongoing, how does this gel with our understanding of the services that our democracy is supposed to provide us?
Um, what? Okay, what has happened is that the story of what our democracies do and what they actually do has become so divergent that they are irreconcilable.
Mm.
Okay, that's the
Hmm.
problem. And this utilization of lawfare is a classic example of the kind of techniques of governance that
Hmm.
have emerged, right? That tell you that show that, right? So
Yes.
in order to in order to protect an ally's capacity to continue committing a genocide, you use lawfare to legally restrict the your population in ways that you know are illegal.
So if we bring this back to the paper on oligarchy, which I
Yeah.
strongly suggested at the beginning of this conversation to our audience to look up, which is uh, Breaking the Grip of Oligarchies, Breaking Oligarchy's Grip, published by you November 17th, 2024. There is a
Hmm.
passage in that paper which I found fascinating because you say, historically, I'll quote, you said, I think that Europeans who had been ruthlessly ruled by monarchs with fixed aristocracies and serfs arranged in a caste system, upon rediscovering the works of the Greeks and the Romans, were surprised by democracies because of the contrast that the Greek models offered to the rigidity of their own European political caste arrangements. And you say, in a crisis of imagination, the Europeans cherry picked, ignored, and misinterpreted and shaped ideas of democracy for the benefit of their own oligarchies. And in places where it would have been better for them to show humility, imitate, and learn, they instead destroyed and imposed vastly inferior systems in the mistaken belief of their superiority. What is happening now? If this assessment you made is correct, what then is happening right now?
Well, I challenge anybody to falsify my
Observation. Yeah.
observation. Right.
Mhm.
I would derive perverse pleasure in quite perverse actually in just um tapping them, to go look at what they would need to look to disprove their own positions. You know, I would take a perverse pleasure in that, and and you would see me if you were close to me, you would see me sometimes rubbing my hands together with glee. Okay, so I mean, well, fine. I mean, the word parler, but parler, parliament,
Mhm.
right? Which when parliaments were um imagined. They were imagined were places that aristocracies could talk.
Mhm.
Okay, and then merchant wealth, because if say, okay, well then, if you don't as the barrier, say, well, no, if you don't have property, you can't enter here.
Mhm.
So then the merchant goes, but I now have property, sir. Can I come in? Yeah, You know, say, well, no, it's blood. He says, well, okay. Well, then the merchant goes, okay. Well, then they go and buy themselves a title. I think there's a point at
Mhm.
which it became absurd. And so they extended it to property owners, and set. So, but basically what this is telling you is, where is the political demos? Who is defined as inside and outside the political demos? Who has a say? Then in the challenge of socialism and particularly communism, they universalized it. They let everybody in because they had competition and they was shit scared. Okay. So that's when they decided to define everybody as a demos. But it's all done on this basic architecture and infrastructure. And the way that power moves within that infrastructure, it continues. I mean, there are even some thinkers who think that democracies are not really sustainable without aristocracies,
Mhm.
right? Um, so that's on one end. Now, in other approaches to to having the participation of demos in governance, they took very different approaches. And I'm going to talk about some of particularly the West African approaches, in which even if you live in a district, you must have a district head. You can't only have a male district head. It must have a father and a mother, because you have to have voices from both sides. Okay. And on that basic symbolic grid, you get many of the West African approaches to that, right? In which the discussions happen here, they filter up to some, and then the discussions happen at another level, and then they have another level, right? And often having three levels removed between the king or the queen, and that, so they cannot take decisions without being utterly aware of what the demos feels in the matter or is experiencing in a matter. Okay. Um, and then we have to go back, because if you look in the chat, there's a discussion going on the difference between philosophy and ideology. So I think we've moved on a bit past. So so but this comes from a very different understanding of even the nature of the political and where sovereignty lies. Okay, because in these kinds of political systems, sovereignty doesn't lie in the sovereign. Everybody goes, so they took, it's the king of the, no, in West Africa and so on, or generally across Africa, the king is not the sovereign, right? They may, they hold, they are the what do you call it? The caretaker of a sovereignty,
I was looking for
right?
the word public servant, but it's caretaker.
No, yeah, they're the caretaker of sovereignty. Sovereignty in generally in sub-Saharan African systems, and I'm excluding um I'm excluding groups like the Somalis and so on from this, and they can correct me if I'm wrong. But um it is that it is the kinship group which is the sovereign. Okay. So in surviving West African political systems, you know which kinship group you belong to, and it has a leader, and the leader carries out functions. Okay. And the person who is carrying out the function is carrying out the function not only for the living, but for the dead and for those to come. So also often also this is a system which displaces sovereignty in a way to the kinship group to constrain the kinds of decisions the decision maker can make.
But this
Okay.
doesn't transcend uh, cluster formation. This doesn't transcend oligarchical manipulation of the masses or exploitation of the masses.
Because the masses do not exist in that, it did not exist in that system. There was no masses. It had structure. The masses come from the European experience of serfdom to the enclosures, the dispossession, and the movement of the rural population into the cities without structure. They destroyed their
Feudalism.
geometry. They destroyed the geometry of relations. Okay, and that is what the description of the mass. But these places did not have masses, right? They had structure.
Uh, just for the audience to have an imagination, for those who are listening and who uh, don't have a visual, a sociological visual of what you mean by the word structure in this context. What would you how would you describe what you mean by structure here?
I mean that you have a geometry of relations that gets things done. Okay, which means that it's that if you turn around and you spoke to those kinds of societies and you say one man, one vote, they look at you like you're crazy. because they have more than a vote. Decisions are being made on the ground based upon what they have to say because they have structure. And the Tocqueville deals with this. Yeah, I can't hear you.
I'm listening. I'm listening to you and I'm nodding, thinking.
Okay, so and this is why we have to be able to think politically. Because if we cannot think politically, we will miss those things. The ideology. When the Marxists go to West Africa and they're talking about the working class, as if these other structures don't exist. I look at it. What's his name? The one who did Sula, the the 120 Days of Sodom.
Ah, we talked
His-
about him the other day.
yeah, can't remember yeah, because one of
Pasolini?
his Pasolini, yeah, one of his Pasolini was saying, look, in Italy there is a genocide basically of the structure of Italian society, right? It was being cleansed.
Things fall
That was his
apart.
argument.
Things fall
Yeah,
apart is a similar
yeah, it's a
uh, uh,
similar critique,
Chinua
right?
Achebe
Yeah,
book.
yeah. So I'm saying that and this is part of my problem with the theological is that the theological often causes you to foreclose questions which prevent you from seeing what is on the ground,
hmm
right? Not that they don't have a point. They have a point, okay? But you're not dealing with societies that just have masses, except where European power structures manufactured that in order to have some uniformity in the material that they were dealing with.
This gives me an opportunity to bring in the World Structural Adjustment Program, which last week I should have mentioned because that was at the core of this discrepancy between Europe having
Hmm.
food security and sub Saharan Africa due to its integration in European modes of exchange, which was modernization and globalization and liberalization and opening into the world market, lost its food sovereignty
Okay.
based on the principles it was supposed to follow through structural
Okay.
adjustment programs. And
Okay. So go on. Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that is just one of the means of destruction of functioning polity.
Yes. Exactly. But and you have to understand that part of politics always has the structuring of food security,
hmm hmm
right? And I'm going to give it the in 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 medieval Europe, what people ate was very different, right?
hmm
There were no potatoes, right? Potatoes came with empire,
Absolutely, that's true.
right? Um, the foods are different. I just because this is something I've been looking at um quite recently. Okay, so let me give you some. I don't know if anybody has heard of the root vegetable called skirret, right? Which
How
is
is it
sweeter than
spelled? How do you spell it?
Skirret, skirret.
Let me try and find a visual of it. Oh Lord, looks like some kind of ginger kind of um yeah. It looks a bit like a rugged cousin of ginger. At least the look it has.
Yeah, and the taste is like it's sweeter than sweet potato,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you tear off you pull it up and you tear off a piece and you leave it. You plant it and after the first year, it we just continue to okay. Salam, I'm Salim. I accept your prayers. Okay. Yeah. So you tear off a piece and when and it just continues to grow. These are
Oh,
very
the
different
Germans,
foods.
the the Germans call it sugar root,
Yeah. So
and it,
this was a staple of European diets.
Sium cisarum.
Mm-hmm.
It's a technical name. And look at what happened in my head. The moment I read the German name, Zuckerwurzel, sugar
Mm-hmm.
root, I thought in my mind, oh, look at that. If you had only grown more of that, my ancestors wouldn't have had to go suffer on your sugar plantation.
Okay, so I'll give you another one. Rampion.
Mm. Rampion.
Mm-hmm.
So rampion, I see. It says it's a biennial bellflower native to Europe, North Africa, and Western Asia. Historically
Mm-hmm.
cultivated for its edible, nutty flavored roots and leaves, often used in salads or cooked like parsnips. It was once a common European root vegetable. It features lilac bell shaped flowers and is notably the vegetable mentioned in the Rapunzel fairy tale. Oh, look at that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Rampion.
So 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 a lot of
Where
these
is Rampion today? What is
it
Rampion doing?
it will be used as maybe a flour, but not it's not food. Not seen as food anymore. Some
Mm.
people might. Okay.
The root
Um,
looks like carrots, just for the
yeah.
audience. The root, when you look at it, when you Google it, you type it in, it looks like a low melanin carrot. Looks like a pale carrot.
Yeah, and remember that the carrots were originally kind of purplish to black, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely true, yeah. It
Yeah,
says the roots have a mild, nutty, slightly pungent flavor, often eaten raw in salads or cooked, and are packed with vitamins A, C, calcium, and iron. Tell us again why we're here. Why are we now looking at rampion?
because
Uh,
we're talking about how in the colonial period they
mhm.
reorganized diets, right? No, they organized the diets by organizing what it was profitable to plant. And so changing the diet was a political act. So it changed the diet because it wanted you to plant cash crops.
Cash crops,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I am here because I'm showing you that within the European situation that had already happened,
Yes, I understand that very well and deeply,
right? So
and
so
it's
it
still ongoing. It is still
yeah,
ongoing.
yes. So that because that had already happened,
Hmm.
okay, what you were seeing was the exportation of what had been done to its people. So that's also one of the reasons why racism is so important, right? Because you cannot the elite of Europe cannot afford for their population to realize this fundamental truth that their situation, that the colonialization that was exported was as a result of the internal coloniality, right? Including what Hobson identifies in terms of the that you don't actually pay in your populations enough, and you are conglomerating capital as profits from this, and so those profits have to go somewhere to look for more activities that will yield it profits because it can't sell to its population because it won't pay them enough to do the work.
Yes.
Okay, so all this coloniality, it happens there first. That's my point. Okay, and in some cases it's happening in parallel. So it's happening first because the slave trade, the sugar plantations, they start happening in early 1500s. Early 1500s they're happening, and I'm a bit because I think that they might have started just a little earlier,
Mm.
right? Um, so, so what I'm saying here is part of the installation of the software of this structure of racism is to ensure that never happens, right? Because that would be devastating. Okay. Um. So, are we going to engage with some of the comments that people have?
We should, but I'm still very much with breaking with the oligarchy and breaking the grip of the oligarchy. We've spoken about how what we call democracy today
Mm-hmm.
is is an ill-fitted, nominally kind of nominally is a nominal effort at placating the population at large uh,
No, that's not
throughout
what I'm
his.
saying. No, no, no. That's not what I'm saying. I really am not saying that.
But I felt the article today was kind of highlighting that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, that's one reading of it,
Hmm.
but that's reading of it is from its normative position. What I'm saying is that power reflects the administration of power or governance reflects power, reflects the interests of power and the anxieties of power. That's what I'm saying. And so, in as much as something becomes a locus, a location of anxiety, it is dealt with. Other than that, it is ignored
It is
because
dealt with. Yeah,
power is about leveraging its own position of power to benefit itself.
that's extremely important. But we do live in systems that call themselves the leading democracies, the oldest democracies, the most accomplished democracies, the most systematic democracies with checks and balances, and the means of power in exerting its own positionality and interests vary, whether the means of power are being expressed through democratic means or through oligarchic means.
Okay, so these are issues of governance, and governance always reflects power. So these policies, the enacting of policies reflects the approach to governance of power.
Do you know why I'm so hesitant to just continue on? It's because to just focus on Palestine, yes, there is a hesitation to call it a genocide from the peak of governance, from the peak of governance of those who facilitated and enabled the genocide by delivering the weapons and the armaments for it, and by delivering the complicity through silence for it. Um, but we're dealing with what I would call, in my ideological position, which I defend as legitimate, which I would call the highest form of socio-political pathology, which is applying a genocide to a population instead of applying democratic deliberations for the fulfillment of the
Okay,
interest at loggerheads.
okay. So here's my point that if power decides that it wants to achieve an end, whether it does it through genocide or democratic means, it's going to do it. Except that if it does it through democratic manipulation, it's going to claim legitimacy, right? If it does it through genocide, it cannot claim legitimacy. Do you see why I look at it
That's
like
why
that?
it has to remain in denial and ratchet down on those who point it out despite them claiming democraticness.
Yes, because it wants to present us with a fait accompli. Okay? It's already done. So I don't care what you think. Okay? The Palestinians are already removed. So what's you going to do now? Okay? So that includes even the complicity didn't begin here. It includes even the classification of groups like Hamas, etc., as terrorist groups, right? In order to delegitimate their political activity. And very early in the genocide, I had highlighted the fact of the oil negotiations that included Tony Blair, the Israelis, and Hamas and the Egyptians. And what happened when when they were behaving so damn badly, when the Israelis would be and the Hamas said, "Well, listen, yeah, I didn't negotiate with us, right?" No, because what was happening is that the Israelis went directly to British Gas and they were negotiating with them. And I said, "No, if you don't involve us, we're going to bomb Ashkelon, which is where the electrical grid and so on is based, right? Industrial. So and at that point, they decided to remove it, to remove Hamas because Hamas ha- it could they did not know their place. Okay, the point I'm making here, and I don't like to make these points with such charged um, issues because people focus on the issue. But I am going back to the basic principle. I'm saying that the policy of removing these vegetables from European palates, from European diets, was in order to replace them with vegetables that could make more profit for an emerging mercantile class. And that mercantile class was bringing mercantilist values to farming, which also included capital formations and agglomerations, which then were affecting the size of farms, right? And the need to systemize extraction. Okay.
And at this point, just from the text that I mentioned earlier on at the introduction, the text from November
Mm-hmm.
17th, 2024, Breaking Oligarchy's Grip,
Mm-hmm.
there's a passage that illustrates what you're saying here, and that I think is extremely important for understanding the present, the
Mm-hmm.
contemporary moment in which we are. I highlighted it. You say oligarchy refers to the rule by a group, and democracy refers to rule by the demos or the people. Our democracies, you write, are descended from a special case of oligarchies, plural, called
Mm-hmm.
aristocracies, and aristocracies fought to limit monarchic power, as is known by almost anyone who's looked at recent 250, 300 years of European history. Then merchants and middle class professionals fought to limit aristocratic power and extend who had a say and a stay in government.
Mm-hmm.
These have been falsely called democracies. And so when the vote or the ability to have a say in who rules was extended to all adults in our societies, it was built upon the infrastructure of oligarchic rule. So today, we have democracies which are effectively oligarchies masquerading as democracies, merchant oligarchies masquerading as democracies.
Mm-hmm.
I could read on further because you then
Mm-hmm.
detail how our oligarchy named democracy is organized today in capitalist society.
Okay. Okay.
But we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
stop there.
But I also bring examples of democratic types of formations that would not have been called that from other groups of people, because what happens is that in the study of political science, the demos that matters in political science is a European one. Okay, so
Hold on. Let this work. Let this sink in a little bit, because this is one of the rare windows these last 5 years where this becomes blatantly clear in practice, where the universal claim in the discourse is overshadowed by the practice of what you've just said.
mm,
I didn't want to distract you or
yeah,
disrupt your train of thought, but when you say that the demos in democracy, as the demos in Greek antiquity, everybody's taught that the demos in Greek antiquity excluded women and slaves and people younger than 18.
yeah, because they're not proper people, you see.
And today, what you're
That,
saying
mm-hmm.
is demos. This certainly does not apply to the Africans drowning in the Mediterranean in an effort to swim over to Europe. Certainly doesn't apply to the Latin Americans that the ICE paramilitary are hunting down, and certainly doesn't
Mm-hmm.
apply to the Palestinians.
Okay, okay. So I'm really digging into why that is, and what I am saying is that the political actor that defines the political field is a European one. It must be defined in European terms. Okay, so that if you want an example of of a democracy, first of all, if you go to look at systems of governance within the African systems, okay, you have to submit to African taxonomies. What do I mean? I mean that Africans will have their own way of naming these things, and it certainly will not include the name democracy. And the how they name them is revealing to how they understand power. Okay, so what we have often is that we are going to study these systems, and we're going no, we're studying African democracies. Now, if you had an African political thinker in the pre-1880 period, they probably look at you like, "What are you talking about? We don't call that that. We call that that." I don't. The point, and but also so that what happens is that by importing that those governance structures into that taxonomy, you colonialize them. Okay, so so now I see a text called um decolonizing democracy and so on. I'm just going. You have to go to the taxonomy first, right? But and I understand why people have to do that, right? But you have to, but we have to be able to politically think. We have to be aware of what is going on. Okay.
There's a lot going on in my head. I'm really trying to make to see how generalizable the statements we're making here are. But it doesn't really matter whether it can be generalized or not. What matters is that it is quite an accurate approach to reading and deciphering what is going on in the world that we perceive.
Okay.
It is as applicable an interpretative observation as one can get.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and a lot of my position on this develops from my study of the African village movements, which emerged in places like Guyana after slavery, in which they were buying the land, and and they would buy the land using susu, so they would pool their resources and buy it, and so the land was group owned,
Mm.
and the British spent a lot of time to legally enforce private ownership within those spaces.
Mm.
Right? They viewed that as a threat, right? So that once they had been able to impose private ownership, which meant that cases could be decided by British land law, right, rather than the associative rules that had been established when they established the village, right, with all of its lands, which did not which did not include private ownership in the European sense, but right of usage, right? So they were still reflecting traditional African political solutions to their situation.
I'd just like to point out that you have a whole passage in today's article. Again, the talk of today is based on breaking oligarchy's grip, workers'
Hmm.
power, and the future of politics. November 17th, 2024. You'll find it on Alexander Carberry's
Hmm.
page. And in that, there is a quite extensive passage about creativity in solving real life problems as the core of politics.
Yes.
And that, right? And you do, I think you mentioned two sources, two books, indicating uh Latin American, I don't know whether it's antiquity, but solutions
No,
for the
these are
Latin American context.
these are indigenous. Um, these are indigenous political technologies.
I have it here. So the two books you mentioned, one of them is from the Americas. You
Hmm.
call it rich political experimentation. He said,
Hmm.
as explored by Waters, which is the author, in indigenous American political thought,
Hmm.
indigenous American political thought and introduction. And the
Hmm.
other one was by Professor Akintoye, A History
Hmm.
of the Yoruba People,
Yes.
Indigenous American Political Thought and Introduction, and A History of the Yoruba People.
Yeah. And the Yoruba are a people and a nation. I want people to understand.
Absolutely.
The
And you
Yoruba are
speak
not
of,
a the Yoruba are not a tribe.
I personally don't use the word
They're a
tribe at
nation.
all. I don't use the word tribe at all because these collective identity groups are nations. And the moment you tie the word nation to nation state, you then get into this strange exercise of calling these kinds of groups ethnic tribes or something like that. And then you miss out the entirety of their history, of the richness of their political experimentations across space and time.
Yes.
And this is something I don't remember who it was,
But
but I was,
mhm.
oh yes, I was listening to a lecture just a few days ago by a guy from the Mises Institute of all places,
Mhm.
and they were trying to explain the origin of obedience, the origins of authoritarian, the origins of political obedience. You know, just as a footnote, I'm currently looking into why the political discourse of the moment has such a hard time calling what is going on in the US fascism, calling what the Palestinians have experienced fascism. The political discourse of our moment has a hard time calling it fascism. And I'm trying to understand why. Because among many
Because it's
authors,
ideological.
the concept of fascism.
No, no, because what you're dealing with is an ideological system
Hmm.
that now must confront its shadow. If it admits to those things, then its its ideological conception of itself must
Mm.
die in order to accept that.
And the funny thing is, Adorno and Horkheimer wrote about this in the Dialectics of Enlightenment. They wrote
Hmm.
about this. The whole position of that, the founders of the Frankfurt School, inspired by
Hmm.
Marx and Freud, among others, chiefly, were
Hmm.
looking at how to explain the fascism after the Weimar Republic. They were trying to understand it. They're trying to, but we are in industrialization. We are the fruit, the beacon of enlightenment in the West. How did we do this? They come to the conclusion that there is a shadow. They come to the conclusion that there is a simultaneity
Hmm.
of the shadow and the fruit of enlightenment, and they call it the dialectic of enlightenment. And I'm looking into that to understand why the West, under the Frankfurt School, understood that fascism is parts and parcel of modernity and contemporary modernity. But today in 2026, that has entirely disappeared from the conversation. And as I was looking at that, I realized that this is sort of part of this conversation at this moment, that we have to talk about fascism if we are being honest with what we're observing. And I realize nobody wants to talk about it.
You notice I don't want to talk about fascism.
But it is. It is.
But just give me a second. I don't want to talk about fascism because that's why I took the time to go back to the genesis, to the genealogy of the European emergence, and to show that when Pope Martin decided to solve his problem of the split, because you had these three popes and all of that stuff, and they've been fighting, and then they came, right? His theological solution was to basically declare a what do you call it? Crusade on the Africans.
Mhm.
Okay, and the African Crusade, right? And I talk about it. And so what I'm s- you know, when Mbembe says of Foucauldian biopolitics, that you have to understand that the necropolitics precedes the biopolitics. Biopolitics emerges out of necropolitics, right? He says that that may be a reading. Right? He has two. One is that one can happen, but he says no. Its roots are necropolitics. Okay, and that is my. So what would emerge later on as the Enlightenment project? I am saying that its basic roots are necropolitical, and I'm not saying that out of to say that is white people or something like that. I'm saying that this are the kinds of foreclosures that this civilization entered into. Okay. And when I bring the African solutions, and I'm talking about them because you're dealing with a civilization that is not beset by those foreclosures and disavowals and issues. So it's another way of looking at the matter, right? It has its own shit to deal with, right?
Mhm.
And so, but but by having a discourse on politics that is only defined by the European experience, is poverty. It's poverty. It's like a crime against ourselves. Okay. So when I say, oh, we must have a democracy and as because the whole I because what you're seeing is the theological organization of European politics, because it never escaped its evangelical roots. So that whenever you have a political school which emerges out of Europe, it is by its nature evangelical,
Mhm.
and it welcomes you into a house of heaven or condemns you to a house of hell. If you don't come into a house of heaven, you're in hell. Right?
I
Think you're
found
in heaven, but you're living in hell. Right? Right?
I found it to also very often be a horticultural kind of discourse. The jungle,
Mm-hmm.
the what do they call
Yeah.
it? The heart of darkness, the jungle,
Oh,
and
that
inside
book
the
is so
Garden
good.
of Europe. Pardon me?
That book is so good.
It's great, but you see
Oh,
the
that book is
other,
so good.
what's his name? The
Oh my God. Oh my God. That book is so damn good.
Conrad. I'm not talking about Conrad
Conrad.
alone. I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
also in terms of um the Spanish European foreign. I'm trying to. I think his name was Jose, but the surname I just can't come. Well, the man who claimed, as the head of the European Foreign Affairs Department, who claimed that Europe is an orderly, tidy garden, and outside of Europe is a disorderly jungle, and Europe must see to it that it keeps the chaos outside of its orderly, tidy garden.
Okay. So there you're seeing the result of that symbolic order. That's why I felt I had to go to somebody like Lacan
Mm-hmm.
to understand that I needed to use tools. And the reality was that I had tried to use traditional temperamental tools to do this, and I realized no, this situation is I too complex. There's too much that I miss in that. So I began to lean on Lacan, Jacques Lacan's work. Okay?
Josep Borrell, um, in
Yeah.
2022, in the fall of
Okay.
2022, he said Europe is a garden, very tidy, and the rest
Yeah.
of the world is much of the rest of the world outside of Western civilization is a jungle, disorderly and unkempt, and Europe has to see to it that it keeps the untidiness, disorderliness,
Yes.
speaking of migration
Okay.
and things of that, outside.
So this is why I have really turned my attention. Again, as a Creole, I turned my attention to indigenous political systems of my region that I would know, um, and African systems, and also European systems, because I see myself as a right and subcontinental ones, the Indian subcontinent, yeah. And I'm also a Muslim, so I've read people like Ibn Khaldun,
Mm-hmm.
etc. So the whole point, and sometimes you know that we'll be having a discussion. I will bring you a Quranic verse which kind of makes a point, right?
Yes. And
Um,
this is something I'm extremely grateful for, because when we were talking about agriculture, when we're talking about political discourse, political orientations, what I realize and what I think many in the West fail to realize is the monocultural and sort of, uh, yes, the monocultural and monomanic sourcing of their intellectual stance in a world of diversity. And another reason that I have this tendency that I'm sensing stronger and
yeah.
stronger conceptually to call what we're
Okay.
dealing with fascistic is the observation and the obstination of
Yes.
uh, currently leaders in the West and the so called illiberal parties that are getting more and more votes in the
Okay.
West to focus strictly on some kind of phantasmagoric great Western tradition
Yeah.
at the exclusion of everything else that human beings have produced.
Yeah, but I think that is another discussion,
It leads into
right?
another.
Because we had remember we did an article on this foreshadowing that
Yes.
right? The rise of the European ethno-state. Okay.
Absolutely. Hmm.
And then we did another article on the transatlantic something, the one that looked at how how the American far right was
Mm.
exported to Europe.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm. Oh, a point so often overlooked, but you are right. It
Yeah.
leads into that other domain.
At least but that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is something else. In fact, you can get hold of this,
Mm.
the Quick and the Brave, their website. That article is in here, right? Um, yeah, because you'll find two dystopia unmasked authors in here, which is myself, Khadija. Okay. But and the reason why I want to do that is because I want to come back, because I can see in the notes people are still they're still wrestling with the question of the difference between philosophy and ideology. Okay. So I want to come back to that. So Robert Romano says philosophy's method is critical thinking. Okay.
Hmm.
Ideology's method is doctrinal application. I would say that critical thinking is one tool of philosophy. It's a single tool. It's not all of philosophy.
Hmm.
Okay. Because in philosophy, you must be able to think about thinking. Okay. And you have to be able to think about that which makes it possible to think. Okay. Because there are certain configurations of things which are unthinkable. And in order to do that, have to you have to rethink how to think about what you want to think about, right? Which meant that you had to think about it first, and you have to deal with all of those kind of not so on that you get into as you run past it. Okay. So philosophy is the study of wisdom. That's literally what it means. And philosophy is thinking, right? And so you will have different schools of how to think. Okay. And a school that is teaches you how to think without actually being able to acknowledge the limits of its thinking, then is not really a mature school. Okay. Now, Salim says, almost simply, ideology is applied philosophy. Politics is applied ideology, and power is applied politics. This is a very standard European understanding of the political. I don't agree with that. Okay, but it's if you've gone through the European educational system, that's the conclusion you're going to come to, right? My position is very different. That you have philosophy, and the ideological is usually okay, because they have political ideologies, and what we're talking about in this case are political ideologies. Okay, the political ideologies are actual templates for organizing how you think about um about the political. Okay, and so yes, in that sense, it is applied philosophy, but it is applied philosophy here. It is not. It is not meta political. It is not looking at how different political formations will organize. It is ideological. It is often, rather than being metapolitical, it is monopolitical. So it takes these are saying, look, these are the limits of the legitimate political. what is desirable as a political ideology, you're going to see. Okay, and um, and in other traditions, they were not they they were never that narrow, including Aristotle, in looking at it, because philosophically, you have to recognize that monarchic rule brings particular benefits. Okay, and it has particular shortcomings. And the classic the classic example of the weaknesses of a democracy was, uh, uh, in as much as it was limited, was the democracy of Poland, when the Russians were coming. They just took too long to take a decision. By the time they took the decision, Russia under one leader who just made a decision, all right, they were they were already defeated. Okay, so that what we're saying is that different political formations have their weaknesses and their strengths. And so for you to say that one political formation is the ultimate goal of all human political activity, in that sense, reads like stupidity, right? It doesn't make sense. Okay, so but in that sense, when I am saying it, there are people who are going to be listening to this, and it is almost as if I'm a heretic to say that. Okay, but I will perform my heresy, because that is exactly what these kinds of ideological formations result in. So that political thought becomes the performance of allegiance, right? So you perform allegiance to a particular political ideology, and then you take reality, you take people's lives, and you hammer them into that. And if they don't comply, then they're a heretic anyway. So just kill them.
That's
Right.
interesting. As
I
I
think that
listened,
that covers. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
one of one of the records that I've been working on for a long time, it just reminded me to finish it. The title of that
Mm-hmm.
record is Procrustes Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
maybe you remember that in Greek mythology, Procrustes is I wonder what his origin is, but he's he has what do you call it?
Good.
Pardon me?
No, no, I'm listening.
Some kind of tavern or something where people traveling can come and stay overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And he's very friendly. He welcomes everybody who's tired and traveling to stay overnight, and there's no ill feeling and no ill idea there. But then once you enter and you fall asleep, he will visit the room and see whether your limbs are longer than the bed he provides you. And if your limbs are longer, he will cut them off, cut them to size, just so you fit in the bed of his hospitality, offered to you in hospitality. And if you're too short, your limbs don't reach the right borders of the bed, your limbs will be pulled and stretched.
Are you
To,
are you saying that this is an analogy of ideologies?
that's what Procrustes' mind is
I
an ideological
I
mind.
I listen. Even I am not going to go that far. If you want to be a heretic like that, I'm going to leave you to jump off there, right? No. How could you say that? No, but that's exactly what it is, right?
Mhm,
Yeah, that is the ideological, right?
mhm, mhm.
So, what happens is that the ideological has colonized the political, and so what you end up with is that people cannot think politically. They can think ideologically. They cannot think politically. Do you see the difference? And
Now,
that's open to everybody.
now it's getting difficult for me because now we have a third category as a mode of thought in itself, which is the political. We had the philosophical, we had the
Okay. So that's why I started and I said that politics is about power.
mm,
So the political is to think about power and its effects on that society.
mm.
Okay.
That gives us 4P: philosophy, politics, power, and procrustes.
hmm So that because politics is supposed to be the same. I mean, if you look at the I can't remember which thinker it was that said that I think it's Aristotle, but I'm not sure. Or Plato, where he talks about that politics is the administration of the polis of the right of the city state, and 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 I whilst I think that's useful, that's really useful in in the Greek context, which was based upon the city upon the city state, which it would be a town for us, it's not a city. Okay, so we are so that we are dealing with with other scales, etc. Okay, and within that symbolic system, which is its culture, its laws, etc., that it had, it is now negotiating how do we deal with power in our towns. Okay, good. Now, I'm saying that we face a very similar situation. We have to now have to talk about how do we deal with power in our mega cities. And when we're dealing with power in our mega cities, how does it affect our rural areas? How does it affect the smaller cities who are not mega cities? How does it affect the village? Okay. Now, because we have this system which assumes that legitimacy is by is arithmetic, right? So the amount of people who say yeah, it's not arithmetic. So then the megacities are going to be disproportionately influential. So that's why some democratic systems will say, well, no, you can't do it like that. If it's just numbers, then these other regions don't have a say. So then they make, you understand? So because you're dealing with power, okay, and you have to be able to think your way through power, and so I'm separating it from this idea of the polis because that is only. So what happened to the rural people? Because remember that for the Romans, the civitas of city, right? And and they just they had a fairly low opinion of the rural. Okay, and so there are systems which in which that does not occur. So it is this whole we have to. That's why I'm saying we have to be able to think politically. And to think politically, we have to think about power. How does power affect people's lives? Okay, and then so when I stepped back and I spoke about how the food sources are organized in response to power, I'm showing you that when you begin to think politically, you have to be able to enter all of these kinds of um, layers of the political.
What you're saying is so unbelievably powerful because I have something to show you
Mm-hmm.
You've reminded me. I mean, as you speak, I'm thinking, and you sent me digging.
Mm-hmm.
And where is it? Here it is. As you speak, you said something today. So what is this? This is uh what you have is
Okay.
a list of symbols that are retrieved, if you will, from the philosophy of the Akan people. Uh,
Please just read a few of them. Then, because it just proves exactly what I'm saying, right? Just read a few. This.
so the one that comes to mind is this hand holding
Mm-hmm.
an egg. And it is the symbol of power itself for these people in the sub-Saharan region.
What do you mean? These people are you Akan?
I happen to be an Akan.
Okay, thank you. So please, it's
And
not
it
those
says
people.
power is like an egg. When held too tightly, it might break, or falls and breaks when held loosely. A successful ruler must be both firm and sympathetic. So power is holding an egg in such a way that it doesn't break. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't hold it too firmly, and holding it in such a way that it doesn't fall. You can't hold it too loosely. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some of the governance wisdom
Yeah, yeah.
that
Please
comes
read
from
another
this.
one. So read another one.
Another political one is this: the God of wisdom says one head cannot go into council, two or three heads are better than one.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one about history. Yes, please, please, please.
Do you see it went to three?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because two, one on this side, one on that side. Three means that you can take a decision. If you had to resort to the numerical, you could take a decision,
Mm-hmm. 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 That's
right?
it. That's
So
it.
you would find that councils in this tradition are never even numbered.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Uh, this one is quite funny. No one
Mm-hmm.
buys a cock to let it crow for another person's town. And this is a very famous one, very popular one that has made it into US Afrocentrism. It is
Mm-hmm.
not taboo to return to fetch something which has been forgotten in the past. You can always correct your mistakes by retrieving from the past and by reading the past how to advance in the future.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, but and that got popular in the United States because of the work of a Ethiopian filmmaker,
oh, tell me about it.
Haile Gerima, Sankofa. He made the film Sankofa. It's worth a look.
I see. I've never heard of it.
It's pretty good.
So here's another one before I stop with this. It says the rabbit appreciating reciprocal aid. They say in pidgin that hand go,
Hmm.
hand come. Do ut des in Latin,
Hmm.
reciprocal aid. So
Hmm.
these are universal principles. This is not something that the Africans invented or that the Greek invented or the
Well,
Latin invented.
well, no. These are inventions. No, you have to acknowledge it is not universal.
Mm-hmm.
You can derive universal principles from it, but it is not universal. It
Mm-hmm.
is very specific to a culture and context.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I mean, there's more here.
The the thing that the thing that the thing that the European claims, right? And this is a
Mm-hmm.
claim that comes out of its evangelical Christianity, is
Mm-hmm.
universality,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
None of these traditions will claim universality.
Oh yes, that's a very good point. Yeah, that's a very important point.
Yeah, that's
But I
unique to
think
the European.
what I'm trying to say, and maybe the utilization of the term universality is a problem. What I'm
Hmm.
trying to say is that Western uh, philosophy and intellectualism
Hmm.
has is hardwired is hardwired to distinguish differences, to distinguish incompatibilities.
Hmm.
It is something that is hardwired in it seems to be a cognitive preference. Through difference, one recognizes oneself. Through that which one is not, one recognizes what one is. Seems to be hardwired in the way Europeans use their mind. And another mode of thinking is by looking not at differences but similarities, which seems to be somewhat weak. It is also present, but it is not the dominant mode of how this civilization has evolved into
Okay.
what it is today.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. So okay, we're getting to the end. We need to wind up.
Mm.
Um, I look at what we call pedagogy. How do you how do you teach? Okay. And in my tradition, one of the teaching methodologies were the Anansi stories. Okay. Um, and and other stories of that nature,
Mm-hmm.
which are meant to transmit a wisdom to you in a way that you can remember. So you carry the corpus, okay, and that you understand the lesson, and you can place qualities like cunning in their right place. So honesty, cunning, you don't. One of the things about the Anansi stories is that they are ensuring that cunning knows its place, right? So it's not disavowing it. Cunning is not just bad, all right? Cunning can be very stupid. So it has to be, you have to, so one of the things about the Nancy stories is the exploration of, of cunning in changing human behavior, which is politics, right? And now, what always amazed me is that this was never considered education. This was considered folklore.
Cautionary tales.
Yes. And this is the thing about the 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 enclosure of the political. For the Europeans, the political is something that happens with European thinkers or Europeanized thinkers. It must have a very peculiar language, etc. Mm-hmm.
Hence, these are tribes, these are nations, these are tales, this is philosophy.
Exactly. And so when you began to read, like what do you call that collection? You Akan people have a name for it.
Adinkra.
Adinka, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when you pull those together, they are clearly wisdoms and a political philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but it but when you speak about it as political philosophy, it often does not get a lot of traction, right? Because in people's mind, in the way that the order is organized, it cannot truly be political philosophy. It is, but it isn't,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is what we call disavowal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think that I think it's really important because what we do is when we take these kinds of positions, we impoverish the political. We
Mm.
impoverish the capacity to think politically.
There
Okay.
is I mean, there is a thing. There is a thing that there is a thing that capitalism has played on humanity,
Mm-hmm.
and that is why a character or a set of characters like Donald Trump will make it to the position they have because having monetary wealth in itself is a value that outcompetes having philosophical depth and diversity, which in itself is a value. But if you pin these two values against one another, you can be bought out by the prior. You can be, you know, You you can be eliminated by the prior. The 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 amount of agency that money can afford an actor possessing much of it, the quantum,
Okay.
yeah, the amount of agency you are afforded with money exceeds by far the amount of agency, immediately actionable agency, that a diversity in wisdom affords you.
Okay. That is only possible in a society in which it's, when I talk about the geometry of relations,
Mm-hmm.
so has been so destroyed that something like capital is becomes the thing that is the sole possessor of power,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to understand that when that is why you have language like the masses.
Mm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's the point. That's exactly my point. Okay, so that in one of the things that you find in West Africa is that you come to the legal system and so on, and very quickly you come up against paralegal formations that are based upon geometry of relations
Mm-hmm.
that are making decisions that the law is completely blind to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the law is the law as we have it is a colonial imposition, which is why in traditional in often in West African traditional systems, um, when you took the matter to the court of the king, you know that the judgment is going to be decisive and it is going to be harsh
Mm-hmm.
because it meant that all of the other ones couldn't decide it.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to push, they want to make the decision, but they want to make the decision in a way that puts the pressure for people to resolve their matters through all of those many layered traditional means of doing so. Okay? Because there are layers of of um of of there are layers of decision making and judging technologies all through the society. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they begin,
Subsidiarity, the conceptual term subsidiarity.
and the reason why I'm struggling with it
Mm.
is because outside of those languages, to talk about them, sometimes there's no English equivalent,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So because you're dealing with the first one is by the family, then the next one is the village, then the next one is the district, right? But then within that, you had other ones. The women could decide matters that men could not
Generation,
decide. The
the leader,
generation, yes, yes, the generation could. So what you have are these competing power centers that mean that are checks and balances which are embedded in the identity of the society.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now you're dealing with a completely different kind of political system
Mm-hmm.
and of people, which assumes that people are just flat, blank, ex nihilo canvas.
Jungle stuff, burn it down, napalm on it, drop bombs on it, thermobaric bombs on it, evaporate
Okay.
them.
No, but what I'm talking about is when you're talking about the masses,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You're assuming you're assuming no structure or
Mm.
very little structure. And and so what you find in Western political thought, that kind of structure is dealt with hostilely. It's destroyed.
In one of the papers you wrote, you introduced this term, thanotic. There is a thanotic perception of whatever is not of our origin and our making.
Well,
Thanotic politics.
no, no, no. But I'm saying something very different, man. I
Mm.
mean, you could put that reading on, but I'm saying that when you have these kinds of formations
Mm-hmm.
within the Western system, They deal with them as threats, like classically, just like a union, which is a classic, which is one of the ones they have now, but they had before. Okay, so they're dealt with as threats. But in those societies, they were traditionally constitutive, unnecessarily constitutive of of identity and politics. You could not separate the political from the identity in that way, and it was constructed, and it must have a voice, right? Because if you don't give it a voice, it's going to it stands in danger of burning down the entire house.
And this is where Marxism comes in, saying, hold on, there is an element in the pattern of interaction, in the geometry of interactions in Western society, capitalist society. There is an element in here that will, in a telos perspective, lead to the house being burnt down. And you used the word threat before, and I think I found a way to bring it full circle. You said, for example, unions are a threat. May I ask to whom unions are a threat?
Precisely. And I think everybody knows exactly who they are a threat to, right? But precisely. So that tells you how the geometry of relations gets stripped out to ensure that really one group, the oligarchic group, their power it cannot be challenged. Okay, this and this is why I say you have to be able to step out of your cultural civilizational biases in order to be able to see these things from other perspectives. And this is why I say that if you're only bound by that, you're poor. It's poverty. It's political poverty. You know, for example, um, in in the Islamic tradition, where when you're educated, you're reading about judgments made by other, like you look at the judgments of Jewish kings, things that they heard about from other places, because when you are facing a political problem, they understood it is how you model it. So they provide you with many models from which to think politically. Okay. And often they collected that raw material in things like tafsir and histories and so on. Okay. That is why Ibn Khaldun is possible. If you have not read Ibn Khaldun, you will not be able to appreciate what I'm saying. But read Ibn Khaldun, and you walk into the work of a genius. Okay, and I'm saying that, and I recognize that Ibn Khaldun does not like black people like me, right? Right. So I'm recognizing that, but you cannot deny his genius and brilliance. Okay, I think we've gone. It's now 12:30. It's a bit late.
And I think we've come full circle, because the subject today essentially was breaking the grip of oligarchic control, breaking the grip of oligarchy. And I think we've in our meandering through the implications and the contextual elements of this subject matter, in this 21st century, we have been able to touch on the core of the article you published November 17th, 2024, which is Breaking Oligarchy's Grip, Workers' Power and the Future of Politics. You can find that on Substack in the posts in the archives, Breaking Oligarchy's Grip. And I strongly recommend revisiting this article, because in it there is a bit of reveal of the blueprint of polities in this time and age in which we are. And remember, the article was published in November 2024, which is 1 year after the begin of the
Yeah.
onslaught against the Amalek.
Hmm.
1 year of the onslaught against the Amalek. And the moment that word was used by decision makers
We
in the
knew what was going to
executive
happen.
branch, we knew what was meant by that for those who knew what the Amalek referred to. And we've seen, and shortly after that, the decision was made to sell the Leviathan gas fields to BP for extraction, and I think 11 or 12 other companies.
Well, within a week, it's very suspicious. Within a week of the beginning of the genocide, they had already sold those gas fields, and the purchases included um, companies owned by
Mm.
the family of Rishi Sunak's wife,
Who was at that time, of
prime
course,
minister.
Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Yeah. So
And
so there was all of that, and we highlighted that. I mean, if you go on to what remains, which is my Instagram, you will see videos in which I deal with it.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And I think they have those videos have millions of views actually.
mhm, mhm, mhm. So, I mean, to make a very long story short, to speak of democracy today, after we've seen what happened after October 7th, is to continue to lie to yourself. We're dealing
Not
with oligarchical oligarchical machinations. That's what we're dealing with. And whether we call it democracy or kumbaya or participatory people's politics or whatever, we have to look at the results. We have to look at the output of these systems. And the output is mashing up Palestinians as if they didn't count to the human family, is
what
abducting
what what no, but no, but what they told you is who they considered the demos,
well,
right?
it's, and I mean,
And they were declaring what the structure of the demos is. Right?
mhm,
The Israeli people and the Palestinian people are not equal. The Israeli people are in that in that valuation they are superior, right? And so on. So what we have seen is the revelation of how demos power, and this is necropolitics. This is classical Mbembe. If you
mhm.
don't, um, yeah,
And
sorry, and the other article was why democracy feels impossible, right?
yes, Why
It's,
Democracy
yeah,
Feels Impossible is a strongly recommended article. It's
yeah.
about a structural diagnosis of the age of algorithms, content, and ideology, published just a few weeks later, December 5th. What am I talking about? A year
No,
later, December
it's a
5th,
year later. Yeah.
2025. December
Oh,
5th, 2025. Why Democracy Feels Impossible. Strong recommendation. And I'd like to throw a name at you and invite you to, for those of you with their minds in Palestine on the Palestinian crisis, uh, look up Yeshayahu Leibovitz. Yeshayahu Leibovitz was one of the most famous polymaths and leading philosophers of the country of Israel. Born in 1903, died in 1994, was a very influential thinker, natural scientist, philosopher, and public intellectual. And he pointed out in the 70s already, he said, what kind of democracy excludes 2 million of the people that it ultimately is responsible for from civil rights? What kind of democracy has 2 million people in its territory, in its vicinity of responsibility outside of its civil rights? That is not a democracy. And he used the term, he called it, in 1982, he spoke of a country governed by Judeo Nazis. I'm referencing one of the leading philosophers of that country, of that territory, of that. entity.
I am distancing myself from you. I don't want
I-
to have any. I don't even know if I know you.
this is the world we live in. But he exists, and his works exist,
Okay,
and his public
okay,
statements exist.
okay. Sorry, it's 12:34. I think we have to.
Thank you
So
very
that's
much.
1:34 on your end. I think yeah. You got it.
Right?
All right. It's been a pleasure, and it certainly has been a revealing journey. For myself, I've been able to speak about things which I think we should speak about a lot more.
Hmm.
Okay.
Thank you
All right.
indeed, and until next week when it's time for Dystopia Unmasked again.
Yes, and thank you people for coming and joining and staying through it all. And I hope it was useful. And Billy Bumbo gave us a list of he gave us Upscrolled as another platform, as the Palestinian platform. And we should,
Mm.
yeah, and thank you, Billy Bumbo, as always, for that. Okay. And if and could you post those links into the video when it goes up?
Thank you.
On the in the comments. Um, Billy Bumbo. All right. Okay,
Thank you
everybody,
indeed.
it's been a pleasure, and we see you next Wednesday. And take care.